Well, what do we have here today? It is none other than, or at least is reported to be by a leaker on Reddit, as the at least if not the final controller for the Nintendo NX, and certainly a prototype controller for what would you assume is a prototype version of the Nintendo NX console. This controller, it looks very similar to a patent that was published by Nintendo. I think it was reported, was it very early this year or very late last year, that looked very, very similar to this. It appears to have, stress the appears to be, a rather oddly shaped LCD screen on it. One would imagine it is touch sensitive, with two controllers sticking out of it, two analog sticks. Now, whether this is legit or not, I don't know. Apparently the image has been analyzed and does not appear to have been on the receiving end of too much interference / tampering. In other words, there hasn't been photoshopped that much, if at all. That with the obvious exception of those two big black squares that are obviously obscuring certain things about the controller that might give away potentially the identity of the person who took the photograph, and we assume leaked the images. My thoughts on this are, concerned, to put it mildly. It doesn't necessarily look like the most ergonomic controller in terms of how do you really hold on to it comfortably. The image doesn't give away any it doesn't appear to be any visible shoulder buttons or analog triggers, which any modern games, certainly a controller intended for use in conventional mass market AAA games, would need to have both shoulder buttons and as I said, and analog triggers. There's no digital D-pad there on the controller, and with the exception, if you see in the second image there I've put up, there appears to be what looks to be a B button, but it actually appears to be an image on the screen rather than being a physical button. So whether that means the only assumption is that this is a touch screen, and that the touchscreen is intended to take the place of those buttons. I personally think that's a horrible idea. I don't think there's no tactile feedback, unless there's some kind of haptic feedback on the screen. You never know, but there's no physical tactile feedback for buttons if they're just an icon on a touch screen. Precision of control, any of that, how that would work, if it would be anywhere near precise enough, I do not know. It definitely doesn't look like it's a standalone handheld device. In other words, it looks to me like it's a dedicated controller for a home console. Assuming that this is legit, or maybe it's just an early prototype example of what we'll be seeing, we assume, at E3. But it's interesting, and it does, again, the other point is because there's already been some patents published about something similar looking to this from Nintendo. This could just be a very, very good mock-up. Now, that rather than being CG or Photoshop, someone actually built a physical mock-up and maybe added the areas that are blacked out just to make it look more legit than it actually is. This may well just be an early version of the controller. Over the final version be ergonomically a bit better, and the lack of physical buttons on the A, B, Y buttons, and the lack of a physical digital pad would give me a serious pause. But then again, the GameCube was really the last console Nintendo built, and the last really controller Nintendo built that was, by the standards of the industry at the time, somewhat conventional. And that system didn't do too well for them. Although, that being said, the Wii U is the exact opposite, and of that, in terms of being very unconventional in many respects, and yet that's been a complete and utter flop. So who knows? But right now, things are certainly getting interesting. I don't remember if this does turn out to be legit. If not the actual, example what the final controller will look like, then certainly an example of an early controller, an early prototype controller that might have been sent out to third-party developers to get them so they could get started working on games. This is probably the single biggest leak from Nintendo, either for a home console or a portable, that if it does turn out to be even semi-legit, that we've ever seen. I don't remember a Nintendo controller being, or even a Nintendo home console being leaked to anything like this degree before launch. I think there might have been a few images of Wii U development kits as the prototype boxes that were the machines were inside of that were intended for use as dev kits, but they certainly didn't give away what the Wii U would end up looking like or what its specs were. So this is pretty significant if it turns out to be legit. Again, the Wiimote in particular was a total surprise when it was announced holiday of 2005 when it was shown off for the first time at the Tokyo Game Show. So this is a pretty unprecedented leak. If it does turn out to be legit, though, it is kind of in one respect a good sign, in that a problem Nintendo has had is that they've been a bit too secretive in the past. They've not been willing to share information with third parties until relatively close to the system's launch, within 12 months, which doesn't sound like, sounds like plenty of time for developers to have access to dev kits and so on. But these days, with the extreme complexity and cost of making video games, yeah, I mean, 12 months is the bare minimum, quite frankly. I think you'd need, certainly for a second generation HD console, which one would assume is what the Nintendo NX is, if it's not a portable, you definitely would need to give developers access to hardware they can start working on more than a year before the system came out. So one way or another, this is potentially, if it's a fake, it's a very good fake. Someone went to the trouble of actually building a physical device, or should I say a physical object, to falsely claim was a controller when it actually isn't. Option one, or option two, it's a leak of what is hopefully, because as I said, of the issues I have with this controller, hopefully a early prototype of what the final controller will look, feel, and behave like. So, yeah, very interesting. Anyway, this is Defub21. If you liked this video, please like it, and let me know about what you think about this controller in the comments. Any positive feedback as well, let me know in the comments. And if you haven't already subscribed to this video, please do so. Toodaloo.